Mhm.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Nothing But Love. My name is Russ Lewis and I coordinate ACON's aging program known as the Love Project, or Living Older Visibly and Engaged. The Love Project aims to empower older LGBTQ plus communities, including people living with HIV, to lead healthy, active and more socially connected lives. I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people, who are the traditional owners and custodians and first people of the land on which I am joining you today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and I would like to extend my respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us tonight. I'd also like to thank the New South Wales Government for supporting this webinar series throughout 2024. With this funding, we have also collaborated with ACON's Northern Rivers team to deliver several in-person events throughout the year. The Love Project marks its 10th anniversary this year, and what better way to celebrate than to chat with fabulous LGBTQ plus community heroes, activists, icons, performers, creatives, authors, and businesses who represent our older communities so well. So, without further ado, our guest tonight is Chantell Martin. Chantell is a proud trans woman who resides in Sydney, originally from A- Aotearoa. Is that how you pronounce it, Chantell?
Aotearoa.
Aotearoa. I know I had my pronunciation there and I still didn't get it.
Close.
Um,
Close enough.
she comes from the Ngati Wai tribe,
Ngati Wai.
Ngati Wai, located on the east coast of the northern region of New Zealand. Chantell is one of the founders of the first trans and gender diverse housing co-ops here in New South Wales. So welcome, Chantell.
Thank you, Russ, and thank you for having me. And yeah,
You're very, very welcome. I'm excited to have a chat to you. I know that we've done some work together over the years and our paths cross in various ways. And I have heard bits and pieces about your story, but I'm really excited just to sort of have a bit of time just to sort of pull apart a little bit about your life and to perhaps delve into a few fun and exciting things that have made you who you are today.
sure,
So,
sure.
let's start at the beginning. Could you maybe share a little bit about just sort of growing up in New Zealand?
Yeah, sure. So growing up in New Zealand, I grew up in the country, bit of country, bit of city, and did all my schooling in a little place, a little town called Whangarei. And that, of course, is where I was born as well. But yeah, just did a lot of backwards and forwards between the city and the country. So yeah.
Wonderful. And how was life? Do you have siblings?
I do have siblings. There's eight of us. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm the third eldest, so
Wow,
yeah,
okay.
eight is enough. Yeah.
Yeah, was that hectic?
Uh, Not so much. Look, I didn't get to live with my siblings altogether because I was brought up by my grandparents,
Yep.
and so we would catch up on holidays and all of that
Yeah.
between any
So you'd
time we
all sort
could.
of come together.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
would. And yeah, when we were all together, oh yeah, it's a
Yeah.
bit of a nightmare for mum and dad,
I'm
but
sure eight
they
children
did
is
well. They did well.
yeah. Are you still in contact with them?
My parents,
Well,
uh,
the family, your parents and
yep,
siblings?
yep, family. Yeah, I go back. I try to go back every year.
Yeah.
Mum and dad are getting older now, so they
Yeah.
can't travel. When they
Yeah.
were younger, they used to travel here because I have a
Yeah.
sister here as well. My sister's here with me in Sydney,
Oh, lovely.
and so in the early days, like mum and dad would travel over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lovely. Yeah, my mum and dad are getting older too. Dad's passed away, unfortunately, a couple of years ago, but mum's still sort of going strong. She's still kind of up in Newcastle. I see her about once a month.
Oh, good.
Really lovely.
Yeah.
So what was school like for you? Did you enjoy school? Were you sort of one to sort of focus or not focus or
Oh, I don't know. I think school um, is different for everyone.
yeah,
Yeah, the typical being different at school and
yeah,
the whole bullying thing. thing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the same thing. I
Yeah.
experienced it as well. But out in the city, it was a lot harder because I wasn't around family. But in
Yeah.
the country, the little country school that we went
Mm,
to, I had a lot of cousins around me, so there wasn't that much bullying out there. Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Was
because
there?
it would get back to my nan, wouldn't it?
It would, yes. And she
Yeah.
was she a strong woman?
Oh, very, very.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Wonderful.
she'll pull us all
And
together.
do you did you have a sense that when you say sort of that bullying thing that a lot of us experienced and being different, did you have a sense of what your difference was, or
I no. I knew I was different. I knew because we're also too talking about a different time as well.
yeah,
We're talking about in
absolutely.
the 60s, right?
Yeah,
So, I mean, a lot of the terms that we use for today, like trans or transsexual, they weren't around when in my time growing up as
yeah,
a child.
yep,
I mean, if you were gay, you were called a sissy, really, more so than anything else.
yeah,
So, pansy. So I got a lot of that.
yeah, mm,
But yeah. But
yeah.
I definitely had a sense of the difference with me.
Yeah, I think we all do, don't we? We just don't have the
Yeah,
we don't have the language for it.
no,
And the same, like, yeah, I think it was Homo or Pufta or whatever it was back in Newcastle days. Um, yeah, we just don't have the language to sort of describe who we are.
hmm, hmm.
So when was the move to Australia? How old were you when you did that?
Oh, I think I moved over here when I was 22. I'm
Right.
pretty sure
Yeah.
it was around about in my early 20s. Yeah.
And was that out of a need just to get away from where you were, or a need to sort of find your tribe, or what sort of was?
I think it was a bit of all of that, but
Yeah.
mostly I wanted to travel because Mum and I had it was the first time I'd ever left New Zealand was when I was 21 or around about that age group, and Mum and I
Yeah.
left and we went to Singapore, and when we came back a year later, I kind of like had I wanted to travel. That I got that
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 bug.
traveling bug, and I
Mm,
just thought, okay, I want to travel. And originally I bought a kind of like a round the world ticket sort of,
yeah.
and went. First stop was to be Australia, and then go to England, and then travel through Europe, and then go through the Middle East and all of that.
Beautiful.
But
Yeah.
I didn't quite get that far, Russ. I made it as far as Sydney, and that was it. Well,
Yeah.
because I got
Wow.
caught up in the nightlife,
Yeah. Yeah.
I came over in 1984 and
Wow. Yeah.
kind of like hit the cross, and my
Yeah.
gosh, it was so exciting. I'm from New Zealand where they were ringing the bell at 11 o'clock at night to get out,
Yeah. Yeah.
and unless you came from a big city like Auckland or Wellington,
Yeah.
that's the only time you would see nightclubs that, would go past midnight.
Yeah.
Other than that, and I've come over here to Sydney, and everything is 24 hours. That
Yeah.
all the takeaways are all
Yeah.
still open in Kings Cross. Also, too, we're talking about a different time in Kings Cross as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Not the same as what it is now.
Yeah.
So it was all bright lights for me, and yeah, I kind of like got suckered into that.
I'm sure. And what
Yeah.
did you do when you got here? Like, what was yeah, what was life like when you first arrived here? Like,
Well, apart from the party life,
yeah,
and getting into everything and anything,
yeah,
kind of like it was it was new, it was different.
yeah,
I also too realized that being here in Sydney and being in the Cross, that I met other like-minded people like me,
yeah,
other people who were gay, lesbian,
mm,
transgender,
mm,
queer, the whole kit and caboodle, and
yeah,
they were all here in King's Cross and Oxford Street and
yeah,
at the taxi club and the Rex Hotel
yeah,
and
yeah,
late girls, the whole thing was all happening. So
mm.
yeah, that was the end of my round of the ticket. Huh?
Yeah. But it must have been such a formative time, like to sort of really find those people that you resonate with and enjoy
Yeah,
being with and partying with and see yourself in.
yeah, that's right. And sort of like also too, I left home as mum and dad's son.
Yeah.
right?
Wow. Yeah.
And so I came here, and then all of
Yeah.
a sudden, after a year,
Yeah.
I was around my tribe, my family. I
Yeah.
was around people
Yeah.
who could, who were showing me how to live my authentic life,
Yeah.
without having to hide anything, and
Yeah.
with no discrimination. So being together, all together, in one kind of giant melting pot,
Yeah.
we kind of looked after each other, we protected each other, and so yeah.
Yeah, it was a really exciting time. I was kind of around, I think I got back to Australia, or I think I got to Sydney about 84, 85. So
Mm.
my experience was sort of similar with sort of Oxford Street and the Cross, and they're all so dynamic, and there was so much going on, and so many colourful people, and it was just a fun time.
Yeah, yep.
Did you find that once you met those people, was transitioning something that sort of happened reasonably quickly? Like, did you sort of think, oh, okay, this is who I am, and this is who I am authentically? What was that
No, it didn't
process
happen
like?
quickly. It didn't happen quickly. It happened gradually, and kind of like I had met up with a couple of girlfriends who were trans. They were Maori, and they were from New Zealand,
Yeah,
and they were over here working. And I
yep,
remember we used to drink at the Rex Hotel, the Bottoms Up bar. And I remember one night, because I didn't know anything about the sex industry,
yeah,
nothing, right? And I'm sitting in the bottoms up bar drinking with these two girls, and they're telling me all about their life and back home in New Zealand, and they never mentioned anything about sex work,
yeah,
but then they said, "Oh, we've got to go to work," and so I drink with them quite often, and they do the same thing. We'd have a few drinks, and then off they would go to work. And here am I thought they were going to a call center. I really did. And then it wasn't until I ran into a bit of trouble with my rent, because I'd spent all of my money, as you do when you party hard. And oh well, I was about to get kicked out of my unit, and I remember saying to the girls, "Oh my God, I'm about to get kicked out of my unit." And they looked at me and they said, "Oh well, you're going to have to come down, and you're going to have to frock up, girl, and come down and sell yourself." And I
sell
went,
your wares. Yeah,
"What do you mean sell yourself?" And
uh, uh,
I ended up by, they took me down to William Street,
yeah,
and look, it was just unbelievable. It was scary. It was so
yeah,
frightening. The lights, the traffic, the
yeah,
people. Hundreds of people coming in from town hall, walking up on both sides of William
yeah.
Street, and cars, bumper to
Driving
bumper.
past, yeah,
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 and they were kind of like, trying to show me the ropes, and I'm hiding, and don't
yeah,
want to be there at all. But you know, I kind of like got where they were coming from, because employment back then for people who were trans, it was impossible,
yeah,
impossible. There's no way. And even if you did get employment back in those days, it was kind of like you had to look 100% woman,
yeah,
and sound and act and dress and everything,
yeah,
and kind of like, and that's hard. That's
yeah,
hard doing that. I mean, I did it,
yeah,
and it's just so exhausting. It's
yeah,
so exhausting. Working a straight job, and as somebody else.
yeah,
You're not being your true self, because you can't, because
yeah,
fear of your safety, right? And if you want to keep your job, you just didn't say anything.
yeah.
So kind of like, yeah, sex work was it for us. So
And I
I
suppose the supports wouldn't have been there either. There wouldn't have been kind of
no.
support for like emotional, physical, medical, sort of social welfare kind of. Was there much support for the trans community around?
Amongst ourselves, yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
each
amongst
other.
ourselves,
Yeah,
around each other, and everything. That's how I started on hormones originally, was
yeah,
through
well,
the other girls, because they
yeah,
had them, because I couldn't get them.
yeah,
You kind of like had to know the doctors that would write out scripts for hormones
yep,
back then, because doctors back then were very fearful of writing out scripts, because
yeah,
they were frightened of losing their license,
yeah,
sort of thing, if something went wrong.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
So it sounds like a scary time, but a quite an exhilarating time with such a sense of camaraderie with all of your friends, like looking out for
Absolutely.
each other. Yeah,
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 absolutely. And, once I did finally start on William Street,
yeah,
on the street working with the
yeah,
girls, because, yeah, of course, my two girlfriends, they went back to New Zealand. But by
yeah.
then I was fully fledged, Russ.
Yes, you knew the ropes.
I
Yeah,
knew exactly what was happening. And
yeah.
I loved every bit of it.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, look, it must have been exciting. So I still remember like driving down William Street, and you'd have to like be in the right lane if you wanted to get past, because all of the other cars were sort of slowing up,
Yeah,
as well as the people on the actual
on this,
sidewalk. Yeah,
yeah, that's right, that's right. And
yeah,
so for us girls, it was kind of like trying to spot who was the genuine client in amongst
yeah,
all the ball scratching yobbos that were yelling,
yeah,
yahooing, and throwing things at us and calling us names. We
yeah,
had to try and like, we developed a technique
yep,
that only comes with that line of work,
yeah,
and with that environment being
mm,
quite, it's, yeah, it was violent, but
yeah,
kind of like, yeah, you kind of like learn this new way of connecting with people. So we had to try and suss out who was a client and who wasn't.
yeah,
And of course, you wouldn't walk up to a car with four guys
yeah,
screaming at you,
yeah,
right? But in between those cars,
yeah,
as busy as it was, there'd be a client in amongst there, and it was a matter of you had to be sharp and you had to
yeah,
know which car it was.
yeah.
Yeah.
And would you? I guess you would look out for each other too if one of
Oh
your
yeah,
friends was sort of,
absolutely, absolutely. So what
because
we
there were
used to do is, because
mobile phones, all that sort of stuff. Like there wasn't as an easier way of tracking people as there is
no,
now.
so we did it ourselves. So if I
Yeah,
jumped into a car and went off with a client, that car would have to go past maybe three or four girls,
yeah,
right? So the first girl would sort of like see what color the car was. The second
sure.
girl would see the number plate. The third girl will know the model of the car, and
Yeah,
then the fourth girl will actually see the client.
yeah,
You see, so yeah,
yeah,
kind of like
yeah,
that's how we were able to, keep each other safe. And if we kind of and when you look at it, that's a lot of hard work.
yeah. Well, it's just sort of
But
being hyper vigilant all the time. Like it's being kind of in your work mode, and you want to probably look kind of glamorous and sexy, and you want to be the person that's doing that job, but also being hyper vigilant to look after yourself.
absolutely,
Mm.
I definitely learned how to be streetwise.
Yeah,
Definitely,
yeah,
right down to even talking to clients when they pull up in the car.
yeah,
You just learn how to tell whether the client's gonna mess you about or
yeah,
whether they're genuine about. Because it's from their response.
yeah,
It's not so much what they say, yes, but it's how they respond to you. You can
yeah,
tell whether they're genuine or not, and
yeah,
then walk away from the car if they're not genuine.
yeah,
And some clients would just drive around for hours and not pick
yeah,
up anyone, and just waste petrol. But
yeah,
that's the
yeah.
luck of the
Wow.
draw, really.
So, how long was sex work for you? How
Oh,
long did that
about
career go?
gosh, it went for about 3 decades,
Wow,
on and
cool.
off.
Yeah,
Yeah, a long time. Yeah,
yeah,
bit of a stayer.
yeah, fantastic. And so, were you living together with friends at that stage too? Like,
Yeah, so in the early stages in King's Cross and throughout my transition, we all
yeah,
lived together.
yeah,
So, I mean, I stayed with another two girls or three girls, and we all stayed together. And
yeah,
number one, it was cheaper to stay together. Number three, we safety in numbers. Number
yeah,
four, like we kind of like we saved up money. And
yeah,
don't forget, it was a time when we were all partying, right?
yeah, yeah.
Nothing but
I know.
partying. There
Yeah,
was
yeah,
not even worried about getting a 24-hour or 7-hour
yeah,
job, none of
yeah,
that. We wanted 24-hour party life,
yeah,
and we were young, like
yeah,
teenagers. We were reliving
yeah,
our teenagehood.
yeah.
And so, yeah, so we
Makes
lived
total
together.
sense. So, with that experience of housing, did like just to make a little bit of a transition, because I know a lot of your working career has been involved with housing. And I
Yeah.
think you were saying the first step was with ACON in housing.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's right. ACON Housing. So before that, though, I definitely was the tenant from hell with
Huh.
Department of Housing. Absolutely. And then I started with ACON Housing. And it came about because, like I said, I only knew how to be the tenant from hell. I didn't know how
Yeah.
to work on that side of the fence
Yeah.
and look after other people in their
Yeah.
housing.
Yeah. But
So
that's interesting
it was all
to be the
new.
tenant, but to be the tenant from hell, kind of,
Yeah.
that's like a lived experience. So at least
Oh,
you can reflect on your own experience.
and it came in handy. It definitely
Yeah.
did come in handy with a few clients that I saw in ACON housing. They would come
Yeah.
in and they go, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and I'm doing this. And
Yeah.
I was able to sort of like see where they were coming from and be
Yeah.
able to guide them back, and say, oh, well, okay, well, number one's not going to work, and number two's
Yeah.
not going to work, and number three's not going to work because this is why.
Yeah.
And they'd go, oh well, what are we going to do? I said, well, we'll have to do number four. That's when you actually have to do something and get up off your butt.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
worked. But I think I was lucky because of that lived experience, be able to
Yeah.
spot it and be able to deal with it the way that I did. I think it would have gone very different if I didn't have that lived experience. It would have gone like this, people would have gone,
Yeah.
what the hell would you know?
Yeah.
You've
Well,
never
that's
had an
really interesting.
experience, eh?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. I think a lot of people that work at ACON
Yeah,
have a lived experience of something, whether it's
yes,
drug and alcohol or HIV or housing or whatever it is. And they kind of bring that lived experience into their role. So it's lived and they can relate to the clients that come through.
yes, exactly. So, starting in ACON housing and again, like I said, it was Department of Housing that, oh, sorry, hang on. It was Homes New South Wales that
Yes, okay,
actually
yeah,
taught me everything I knew because all of their forms were just laborious,
yeah,
bureaucratic bullshit, really. They were set up to make people fail because
yeah,
the questions, oh my God, in each form that you had to, and because they didn't have the training either to dealing with the public, with the community, so they would just go, okay, you want housing, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 forms, take them away, fill them out, bring them back. That's it. No one showed them how to do it,
yeah,
and they certainly didn't have the time either.
yeah,
They never got paid enough to
yeah,
be able to sit down with them, what
yeah,
needed to be done, and I think that's where Gone Housing came in and worked in really well with Homes New South Wales back then because we could actually step outside of a box that they couldn't.
yeah,
They were binded by a lot of policy and procedures. So
yeah,
that whole giving them the forms, that was it.
yeah,
Whereas ACON Housing had that niche where I could do all of that for them. Like they
yeah,
would come to me and then I would say to them, okay, right. And because I had got all my training through wonderful gatekeepers at housing,
yeah,
I'd ring them up and say to them, hey, listen, I've got a letter here. I've got a client sitting in front of me. They're about to get kicked out. I don't understand this form. And so what you do is you plead to their better half
mm,
and then they start to help you and they work with you. And that's what had happened to me.
yeah,
I've got on really well with them, created quite a few gatekeepers within, Homes New South Wales. And over the years, was able to just ring through whatever needs to be done. And so, yeah, it went on for that. And I loved that job. I
mm,
was quite passionate about that job. There's nothing more greater and joyful than seeing somebody get housing, right?
yeah,
Knowing kind of full well that without that stable and secure roof over your head, how are you supposed to achieve anything else?
yeah,
You've got so many other things going on in your life.
yeah.
And yeah,
Oh yeah, it's incredibly important just for whole health and well-being. Like have a roof over your head and for it to be safe and
yeah,
sound, yeah,
yeah.
is so important. And that would have been an interesting time too, because that was the first time Acon had done housing.
I'm not
Oh,
quite sure. Maybe I think maybe
yeah,
because I don't think yeah, I don't think it was around too long before I started in
yeah.
there.
So how long were you there with Acon?
I was about 3 years.
Wow, okay, cool.
Yeah, about 3 years, just under 3 years.
And
And then
then
I
where
left,
to?
yeah, I left ACON and went to work with the Gender Centre.
Oh, yep.
And
In a similar role or?
yeah, very similar. They actually my job role was to set up a housing system like how we had at ACON Housing,
Yep.
and we did that, but also too, there was another component to that role as well. The Gender Centre has residential housing as well. And so it was a matter of looking after those homes that they had with people, and it was the first time I'd ever worked with my community in such a big way, with ACON housing, it was a bit of mix of everything, gay, lesbian, trans, queer,
everyone.
With the Gender Centre, it was specifically transgender, either male or female. And boy, was I in for a journey and a half.
So we're what are we looking at? Like 15 years ago, 20 when you were at the Gender Centre? How long were you at SWAP for?
Well, I kind of like I was at ACON in 2000s.
Yeah.
Right.
2000,
and, 2000, and then kind of like was there for 3 years, and then moved on to the early 2000s at the Gender Centre.
So how have you seen? What's your reflections just on sort of the changes for the trans and gender diverse community over, say, the last 15 years? What stands out for you as someone with lived experience, but also just observing what changes have been made?
Oh gosh, I think just observing it from when I first transitioned and for us, right up till now, there's been a lot of changes, right? But what hasn't changed is the stigma and discrimination that we still, and I think that's overall for all communities, right? And that's something that we're still going through. We're still going through that, even in, thank you to Homes New South Wales giving us properties, but hey, at the end of the day, sometimes those properties are not the best properties for us. And it's because of our environment. We're not in a safe environment. And, it's hard for them because their job is to just house you. It's not about, okay, right, you don't get to choose that, you want a unit with, a balcony looking over water views and stuff like that. Our job is to just house you, in the best way possible. So
and perhaps not even consider safety.
That's right.
Yeah, like who do you live next door to, or who else is in the building, or whatever.
Or attending to complaints, about what happens to us, with paintings on the doors, or faggot, AIDS carrier, all of that, tranny hall, the whole thing, and it's still happening. That is still happening today. So other things in our community and for our community, yes, I have seen lots of changes, and some of them are really, really good. Others have not been so good. And the one that doesn't change and hasn't changed yet is the stigma and the discrimination we still feel. And that's what makes it really hard for us to be in a stable environment. Look, I'm not saying that this is for all of us, but not all of us are also too born into privilege where we can have money to move into a nice unit and be able to choose where we go. That's not the case for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Good on you for being at the forefront of that change and having that understanding around kind of the housing needs in particular.
Thank you.
So from the Gender Centre, was it then an experience of working with SWAP, which is was that your next kind of lived experience work job?
Oh, it certainly was. And it kind of like,
how was that?
It's almost like a full circle thing, working on William Street, as a transgender street-based sex worker in the early 80s, and then kind of now all of a sudden, I've got this job as SWAP's transgender outreach worker. And again, something very, very similar to my housing experience where I knew all about being a sex worker, but kind of like working on the other side of the fence and working as a peer, and having to learn about our legal rights and, the law, all of that stuff, and, about giving information over for, to my community. And I mean the sex working community as a whole, including my community.
Well, that's sort of layered.
Yeah,
That's
they
a
were,
layered thing,
and I
yeah.
was in a really good position because I could do that. I could jump through, the different gender roles
Yeah,
as well, because
yeah,
they're, I mean, the sex industry is huge, but learning everything about the sex industry and on the other side of, sex work was really interesting. It was a journey. I spent 13 years working for SWAP. And in that 13 years, I learned so much. And when you're in a position like that, and it was also too at a time when there weren't too many trans people within the community sector, working in the community sector. So they're kind of like, I've got this position as the transgender outreach worker for SWAP, and it was kind of like trying to learn and gather as much information as possible to benefit my community, right?
yeah,
And to be able to go out on outreach and meet with sex workers in brothels on the street, privately, and be able to say to them, okay, this is what this is what you need to know. I'll just let you know about your legal rights, and that's really interesting because a lot of sex workers don't know about
yeah,
their legal rights. And it was important for me to make sure that they knew their rights so
yeah,
that clients couldn't mess them over or the legal system,
yeah,
right? Because even people in the legal system don't even know the laws of within the sex industry. We got decriminalization of the sex industry in 1995,
yeah.
and the thing is we should be proud about, and I certainly am as a sex worker, is that we were the first, New South Wales was the first jurisdiction in the world.
Oh, was it? I didn't know
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
absolutely,
right.
absolutely. And then the next jurisdiction, the next country to pass that jurisdiction was New Zealand. The country of
Oh,
my
there you go.
birth in
Yeah,
2003. So,
yeah,
kind of like we had it since 1995.
yeah,
That's something to be proud of.
yeah.
And yeah, but
So that,
mostly it was about gathering as much information as I could to help my community. Yeah.
yeah. So that was such a unique role because you're kind of the first person doing that role with a lived experience, working with a cross section of people, but a lot with the trans community, the trans sex workers.
Yeah,
So it's a
look, there
really
were
unique role, isn't it?
It
Like,
is, it is. I mean, look, I actually I was climbed onto the back of some of my other,
yeah,
counterparts before me. So there
yeah,
were people before me that
yeah,
actually did that role. But also too, they did it in a different time as well,
yeah,
and they were, I I gathered as much information as I could from them as well.
yeah, yeah,
They always say, we live off the shoulders of
absolutely,
our
yeah,
predecessors, and that's what I did. I gathered as much information from that side, and
yeah,
then the legal side, the health side, and
yeah,
because we work so closely with a lot of health clinics and sexual health services that
mm,
we were, myself and all the other outreach workers at SWAP were able to go out there and deliver that, and get
yeah,
that message out there. And something just quickly is that you'll find that sex workers have been practicing the best practice of sexual health for years, and we've
yeah,
always known about it.
yeah,
Even more so than the general public.
yeah,
So because we know where to go, we know what even right back in the days of in the 80s when I was working on William Street,
mm,
Kirkton Road used to come down on their bus, the Albion Street Clinic used to come on their bus, and they used to test us and everything. So we were well informed about our
yeah,
own sexual health.
yeah. Yeah,
Anyway,
it's
I'm
not
going to get on
surprised.
I'm going to get on a tangent in a minute.
No,
Don't
no, that's
start me
really,
up, Russ.
I look, that's really interesting because a lot of gay men also are very active in knowing about their sexual health. They look after themselves. They want to look after themselves. They don't want to um, fall ill or or have risky behaviors or whatever. They are educated. We're lucky to have a pretty good medical system here where they can go and get kind of health checks, sexual health checks, and medications are free or next to nothing. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a similar experience. So that I'm just conscious of time, but I'm really kind of keen to hear a little bit about the trans and gender diverse housing co-op in New South Wales and how that all came about, because that's pretty special.
It's very special.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very special. And that came about from my time working at Swap. And I had a good friend who I used to work with at Swap, and he used to see me, you know, speaking to all the trans workers that would come in to see me, and you know, a majority of their questions and their help that they needed was always around housing, right?
Yeah.
It was never about sex work. Like I said, we
Yeah.
already know what it's about, being a
Yeah.
sex worker. We know where to go. We know what if we, you know, if we need to know anything, we know exactly where to
Yeah.
go. But you know, a lot of the girls were coming in to see me about housing,
Yeah.
you know, and they have nowhere to stay. So this friend of mine said to me, you know, Chantell, you know, kind of like, had you thought about starting up a housing co-op, a transgender housing co-op? And I'd never heard of anything like that. And he said, I said to him, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. What's that? And he goes, well, it's kind of like a co-op, you know, like you get a bunch of girls together and then you start up this housing co-op, and I'm trying to break it down as brief as I can. And pretty much, you know, you can do this, you can do that, but you all become, basically the bottom line is with the housing co-op is that you have members who are also two directors, but also tenants. Okay,
Right.
so basically it's not the same as Homes New South Wales, like being a tenant of Home New South Wales or living in the private sector. You kind of like have to be accountable for the whole co-op itself. So you get to run it with the other members. Okay. There are advantages to that, is that you kind of like with Homes New South Wales, once you reach, if you decide to go out there and work, and once your wages, once you get up into a higher bracket, you've kind of like got to leave. Okay,
Yeah.
once you start earning more into the higher income
Yeah.
bracket, whereas you know whereas co-op housing, it's not like that at all. You still get to keep your home,
Yeah.
okay, and still work, and if your wages go up and down, well,
Yeah.
there's no interference with that. The other thing is that, you know, safety in numbers again, but like, you know, working on William Street with me and my other sisters around me, and protection, that's another thing, you know, that
Yeah.
it's really good for. And, you know,
So the
so
houses are all together.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they're all together,
Yeah.
and kind of like, so we've only just recently got properties, and a
Wow.
lot of
Cool.
people would have heard about this through the city of Sydney.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not saying anything that's not already out there,
Yeah.
right? Because Clever Moore's beat me to the punch.
Yeah.
So we're already out there, but we've been together since 2011.
Right.
So it's been a long, long process,
Wow. Cool.
right? And then we had to become incorporated as a legal entity, right?
Yeah.
And that was I think it was 2016. So
Right.
kind of like, yeah, the whole, you know, staying together and sticking with it. And throughout that time also too, we've had people come and go as well.
Yeah.
And it's been a mixture of both. You know, it hasn't been just for trans women, and it's still not just for trans women.
Yeah.
But our goal and our vision, once we got our constitution together and once we got our model rules together, um, our vision is to grow that co-op for our community, and we can grow it in so many ways. But it was about laying the foundation down for that housing co-op, and that's what we've done,
Yeah.
right? And
Wonderful.
then from here, our vision is to look at our youth in our
Yeah.
community and the elderly in our community, but also too people in the middle of that bracket,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And so there are so many things where we can go with this,
Yeah.
but that's kind of like further along down the track. At the moment, we're just holding it together to lay our foundation down, because once
Yeah.
we've got
Yeah.
that foundation, then we can move on. So
Well,
yeah,
hardship and opportunity are sort of intergenerational for everyone, really, aren't they? Like, doesn't matter sort of how old you are, you can still face the hardship and to have the
absolutely.
opportunity to be part of a co-op like this for safety and for financial, more financial ease.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Is
yeah.
there a launch date? Can I push that far, or can you not?
Not yet, not
Not yet.
yet,
No.
yeah, not yet, because contracts are still getting signed, Russ,
Yeah. Good.
and you know, we're still trying to get the behind the scenes things sorted. But yeah, definitely.
Uh,
We'll look at something like that.
and do you find yourself like mo- mother now to younger trans people? Are you kind of a motherly figure or not?
No,
No.
no, I would no, not
And
mother, not great mother.
that's a
Uh,
positive thing.
yeah, yeah, I know, I know. I would say just as a, somebody who's, been around for a long time
Yeah,
and being able to, pass on this because I don't get to keep what I've got,
yeah,
and what we've done here. And also too, with this trans co-op being the first co-op, transgender housing co-op in the world,
yeah.
that's another thing as well that
Wow,
we
in
can
the
do.
world. Wow, that's good.
So
Yeah,
I've got this little habit of hooking up with first in the world,
yeah, that's great.
I know. Look at the sex industry first in the world,
Yeah,
and now this. Look, there are many other housing formats out there in the world, and always have been, but none
yeah,
as oh, I don't know what the word is. I can't say together, but none as solid as this,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But I think that solidness has only come from the members and our tenacity to stay together.
yeah,
We kind of like, there were a few times there where I just kind of lost hope in us ever getting this up off the ground. And, there have been a lot of hurdles along the way, but throughout it all. And something, the other thing is so grateful and have to thank all our past members that have come and gone through the co-op
yeah,
because each one of them that was a part of this co-op and the building of this co-op left something with us to get us
yeah,
to where we are,
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it takes a village of people to really create it. Yeah.
absolutely.
Amazing. Well, that's really exciting. I have shared with you that I actually was traveling recently and sat on the plane next to Rick or Roger or
Nick, yeah,
Nick. Nick, that's it.
the
Yeah.
CEO of Common Equity, yeah. And
Yeah,
he
yeah.
actually, I did the AGM, the Common Equity AGM on Saturday,
Oh, okay.
and he said to say hello.
Oh, cool. Yeah, no, he was very special. It was lovely to sort of see someone like him as such a strong ally and someone that understands kind of what's going on, really,
Yeah,
and be
yeah.
part of it. Well, look, I've got a couple of questions that I might just jump to from um, people that are joining us tonight.
Hmm.
Um, and maybe this one speaks a little bit to what we've just been talking about with the housing, but it says, what is your favorite lesson about collective organizing and how did you learn it?
Hmm. What was my favorite?
What was your favorite lesson about collective organizing? And how did you learn it? I guess it could be kind of to do with that kind of collectiveness with the people that you were just talking about, like to
Yeah,
stay
look,
together.
yes, and I think also too, it's the people who came and joined the collective, right?
Mm.
And working together. I mean, we definitely had to get to know each other quite
Yeah,
well to be able to stay together so
yeah,
long,
yeah,
right? And I think the learning part of that, connecting, and also to again, like none of us had housing co-op experience, none
yeah,
of us, and
yeah,
we're just so thankful that Common Equity. They're the people, by the way, who look after all the housing co-ops in New South Wales,
yeah,
and we're only really lucky that they came on board,
yeah,
We've seen two, maybe three CEOs go through that place, and
yeah,
they've all kind of like, left a little bit for
yeah,
us. But they did a lot of training. I think for me, the most exciting thing. And see, again, I'm quite lucky and fortunate, whereas a lot of the other members in our co-op, they kind of like had never come up against anything, like not even doing meetings, the monthly meetings that we do, taking minutes, chairperson, treasurer, none of them had any experience
yeah,
there.
yeah,
Whereas I did. When
yeah,
I started in housing at ACON, I was about to go on a journey, and that included all of that, you
yeah.
know, how to run a meeting, the minutes, being the treasurer, being the chairperson, and all of that. So yeah,
Mm. We just got a lovely message from Cheryl just saying amazing initiative. Oh, I just lost the message, but just celebrating kind of what you're doing. Amazing initiative. Thank you so much for sharing your story. So interesting. How can people follow your journey?
I guess through Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah, Facebook.
Okay.
Maybe jump on my Facebook page and
Yeah.
see. Yeah. We're currently trying to sort out the All Nations one. So
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, maybe jumping on my Chantell Martin Facebook page and yeah, we can, yeah.
Okay. One other question I've got is, what small thing could each of us do right now to help our trans and gender diverse community?
I think just being there for each other and supporting each other, that's, I guess, one of the things that I've learned throughout my life, and being in the trans community is that, I've always been at some stage or another throughout my journey, been in a position to be able to, support, even if it's verbally, even if it's just to, be able to make referrals to, better housing, whatever, just that huge support. And also too, that works both ways as well, being out for the allies, for our allies out there, if you see something that doesn't look quite right, just say something,
Yeah,
speak
absolutely. I think being a
out.
strong ally for
Yeah,
all of the
absolutely.
community is really
Yeah.
important. Yeah.
But I think, stronger together, and also
Yeah.
too, nothing about us without us,
Yeah,
staying
absolutely. Well,
together.
also thank you for last week and speaking at the Trans Remembrance um, event.
Oh,
Yeah, it was a beautiful night, and everyone spoke so passionately and clearly and beautifully. So I really enjoyed that.
thank you.
Well, look, we've probably come to the end of our time. I don't think I've got any other questions. I think
Mm,
we could talk for hours. I adore you. I've got nothing but love for you. I know a lot of the community will already know that about you, Chantell. But hopefully, you sharing a little bit of your journey tonight will allow other people to kind of get a bit of a taste of who you are, the journey you've been on, and also how they can sort of step in and support as well. Um,
thank you. And thank you for thinking of me and having me on the show.
Oh,
It's
look,
been
absolutely
amazing.
love it. Absolutely love it. I'm glad that we've been able to do it this year. We're very lucky that the last one for this year is in 2 weeks' time, and we've got Catherine Barrett, who's a wonderful older queer woman who is in Melbourne, and she is the director and founder of Celebrate Aging. And Celebrate Aging is a charity committed to creating a world without ageism and a
Mm,
world of respect for older people. And Catherine's probably one of my role models. She does amazing work in that space. Do you know of her, Chantell?
I don't
No,
think so.
no.
But I say
Um,
that, I always say that, and then I see them and I go,
yeah.
oh,
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 yeah. Of
okay.
course, I know that one. Yeah, yeah. Well, Catherine and I have sort of crossed paths over the sort of 10, 11, 12 years at different conferences, and so she'll be our next guest to sort of round out the year. But thank you again. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time. And I look forward to running to you in the halls of ACON very,
Thank you. And
very
thank you for
soon.
having me.
You're
Good
welcome,
night.
darling. Yeah, good night. Bye.
Bye.